June 29, 1944, 3 miles inland from Omaha Beach. Sergeant Curtis Culin crouches behind his Sherman tank as German 88mm shells scream overhead, each one sounding like a freight train tearing through fabric. His crew is pinned in a narrow Norman lane, hedgerows towering 12 feet on either side, roots buried so deep into the earth they've stood since medieval times. Somewhere ahead, hidden in the labyrinth of ancient farmland boundaries, a Tiger tank waits. Culin knows the mathematics. His Sherman's 75mm gun can barely scratch a Tiger's frontal armor at any range under 500 yards. The Tiger's 8.8 can punch through his Sherman like a knife through butter from over a mile away. In open terrain, that's a death sentence. But here in the bocage, the hedgerows change everything. Except they don't change it in the American's favor. His driver, Corporal Roberts, looks back from his hatch. "Sarge, we gonna try climbing that hedgerow again?" Culin shakes his head, remembering yesterday when they tried. The Sherman reared up like a bucking horse, belly armor exposed, tracks clawing at dirt and ancient roots. They made it halfway up before sliding back, 25 tons of American steel helpless as a beached whale. Perfect target. 2 other Shermans in their company tried the same maneuver. One took an 88 through the thin floor armor. 4 men burned alive. The other threw a track and sat immobilized for 6 hours under sporadic fire until recovery vehicles could reach it at nightfall. But what choice do they have? The narrow lanes between hedgerows create natural kill zones. German machine gunners and anti-tank teams hide in the thick vegetation, waiting for American armor to crawl past at walking speed. The tanks can't leave the lanes because the hedgerows are impassable. They can't advance down the lanes without exposing themselves to ambush. And they absolutely cannot climb over the hedgerows without presenting their vulnerable undersides. It's the perfect defensive terrain, and the Germans know it. What nobody knows yet is that in 48 hours, Curtis Culin will solve a problem that has stumped Army engineers, tank designers, and tactical planners. He'll do it with scrap metal, a welding torch, and an idea so simple that officers will initially call it stupid. That idea will change the invasion. To understand why Culin's innovation proved so revolutionary, you need to understand that the Norman hedgerows represented something American planners never anticipated. Intelligence officers studying aerial photographs before D-Day saw the bocage, the distinctive patchwork of small fields divided by hedgerows. What they didn't realize was that these weren't decorative bushes. These were living fortifications that had been growing for 800 years. Norman farmers, starting in medieval times, piled dirt and stones along their property boundaries, then planted trees and thick brush on top. Century after century, roots grew deeper, earth packed harder, vegetation grew denser. By 1944, the average hedgerow stood 10 to 15 feet tall, built on an earthen base 4 to 6 feet thick, reinforced by root systems that went down 8 feet or more. The trees growing from the tops, mostly oak and beech, had trunks 18 inches thick. Between the hedgerows lay small fields, rarely larger than a few acres, connected by narrow sunken lanes worn into the earth by centuries of cart traffic. These lanes, some of them dating back to Roman times, sat 10 feet below the surrounding field level, with hedgerows rising on both sides like walls of a maze. American tank crews quickly discovered that the bocage wasn't just difficult terrain. It was a tank commander's nightmare. The narrow lanes forced armor into single-file advance, moving slowly, unable to maneuver. Every bend in every lane offered perfect ambush positions. German defenders needed only a panzerfaust, the shoulder-fired anti-tank weapon, and a hole in a hedgerow to destroy American armor at point-blank range. The thick vegetation provided perfect concealment. A German soldier could hide 10 feet from a Sherman and remain invisible. The Americans tried everything. Combat engineers used Bangalore torpedoes to blow gaps in hedgerows, but each gap took 30 minutes to prepare and created predictable breakthrough points the Germans covered with machine gun fire. Tanks tried firing their main guns into hedgerows to create passages, but the ancient roots and packed earth absorbed 75mm shells with barely any damage. Some crews attempted to use brute force, ramming hedgerows at full speed. The Shermans would climb halfway up, belly exposed, then slide back or become stuck. In 3 days of fighting around St. Lo, the 2nd Armored Division lost 23 tanks to this exact maneuver. Most were hit in the thin floor armor while helplessly suspended on hedgerow embankments, crews trapped inside burning metal. The casualty rates told a brutal story. American forces expected to advance 40 miles inland within the first week after D-Day. By late June, they'd barely pushed 7 miles. Units were taking 50% casualties in some sectors. The bocage was doing what Hitler's Atlantic Wall couldn't, stopping the invasion cold. General Omar Bradley, commanding all American ground forces in Normandy, later called the hedgerow fighting the most difficult terrain problem we faced in Europe. High-level staff meetings in late June grew increasingly desperate. Engineers proposed specialized equipment, custom bulldozer blades, explosive charges, even flamethrower tanks. Everything required manufacturing time, shipping from England, field testing. Bradley's staff estimated 6 weeks minimum for any engineered solution. 6 weeks meant thousands more casualties and the possibility that the Normandy invasion would stall completely. Meanwhile, the Sherman versus Tiger problem made everything worse. American tankers knew their vehicles were outmatched before they ever landed in France. The Sherman tank, workhorse of the American armored force, entered service in 1942 as a capable medium tank. It weighed 33 tons, mounted a 75mm gun, carried frontal armor 51mm thick, and could reach 25 miles per hour on roads. It was reliable, easy to produce, and adequate against most German armor in North Africa and Italy. Then crews started meeting Tigers. The German Tiger I heavy tank weighed 57 tons. Its frontal armor measured 100mm thick, angled to increase effective thickness to nearly 120mm. The Tiger's 88mm gun, developed from the legendary Flak 88 anti-aircraft weapon, could penetrate 110mm of armor at 1,000 yards. A Tiger could kill a Sherman from a mile away. A Sherman couldn't reliably penetrate a Tiger's front armor even at 100 yards. The mathematics were brutal. Army Ordnance Department testing in early 1944 confirmed what tankers already knew. A Sherman's 75mm gun firing standard armor-piercing rounds achieved penetration against Tiger frontal armor only at ranges under 200 yards and only when hitting perfectly perpendicular to the armor plate. Any angle, any greater distance, and the American shells simply bounced off. Tiger crews, by contrast, could engage Shermans at leisure from beyond retaliation range. After-action reports from Normandy documented the reality. American tank battalions needed, on average, 5 Shermans to destroy 1 Tiger. That ratio assumed the Shermans could maneuver, flank, and hit the Tiger's thinner side armor. In the bocage, where maneuver was impossible and every engagement happened in narrow lanes or small fields, the ratio got worse. Some engagements saw 8 or 10 Shermans lost trying to knock out a single Tiger positioned at a hedgerow gap. American tankers developed dark humor about their situation. They called Shermans Ronsons after the cigarette lighter, because they lit on fire every time. They called Tigers furniture vans because of their boxy shape, but everyone knew the joke masked fear. Tiger sightings prompted instant radio chatter, calls for air support, artillery bombardment, anything to avoid direct engagement. Curtis Culin knew all of this. Born in 1915 on a farm outside Cranberry, Tennessee, Culin grew up fixing tractors, welding broken equipment, and solving practical problems with whatever materials were available. When the Depression hit, he worked as a mechanic, then a welder in a Knoxville machine shop. He enlisted in the Army in 1941, ended up in the 2nd Armored Division, and landed on Omaha Beach on June 7 as a tank sergeant. He possessed no engineering degree, no formal technical training beyond basic Army maintenance courses. What he had was a farmer's practicality and a welder's eye for how metal behaves under stress. By late June, Culin had watched his battalion lose 7 tanks trying to breach hedgerows. He'd seen crews burn. He'd participated in the desperate meetings where officers tried to devise solutions. Everyone agreed they needed some kind of cutting device on the tank's front, something to slice through the hedgerow's root system. But what? Tank maintenance officers suggested welding steel blades to the glacis plate, but nobody could figure out the right configuration. The roots were too thick, too deep, too strong. On June 28, Culin was walking through the debris field near Omaha Beach, looking for salvageable parts. American policy was to use anything German equipment could provide: rations, fuel, occasionally weapons. That's when he saw them. The beach obstacles. Specifically, the Czech hedgehogs, welded steel rails arranged in tripod configurations, designed to rip the bottoms out of landing craft. Thousands of them littered the beach, now useless, just scrap metal. Culin stared at one hedgehog for a long time. The steel rails were roughly 3 inches thick, heavy construction stock, angled and welded into an X shape. Strong. Rigid. Sharp where they'd been cut. He thought about how hedgerow roots grew, dense networks spreading horizontally through the compacted earth base. What if you didn't try to cut through them cleanly? What if you just ripped them apart? Culin approached his company commander, Captain Jimmy Depew, that evening. "Sir, I think I can make something that'll let us drive through hedgerows without exposing our belly." Depew, exhausted from another day of casualties, barely looked up. "Everyone thinks they can, Sergeant. What's your idea?" "Welded steel teeth on the front hull. Like a fork. We hit the hedgerow at speed, the teeth bite into the base, we drive forward and the roots tear out instead of us climbing up." Depew frowned. "That's it? That's your solution? Just weld some metal on and drive through." "Yes, sir." "Sergeant, that's the stupidest thing I've heard all week." Culin nodded. "Probably, sir. But it might work. And it won't take 6 weeks. Depew stared at him for a moment, then shrugged. "Fine. You've got 24 hours. Use whatever you need from the maintenance section. If it doesn't work, we forget about it and never speak of this again." Culin gathered 3 soldiers who'd worked as welders before the war: Corporal Al Henderson, Private First Class Dino Castelli, and Private Bob Reed. He explained his concept, sketched it in the dirt with a bayonet. 4 steel prongs, each about 2 feet long, welded to the Sherman's lower glacis plate at a 45-degree angle. The prongs would extend forward and slightly downward, positioned to bite into the base of a hedgerow when the tank accelerated into it. They worked through the night of June 28. The maintenance section had cutting torches and a portable welding rig. The nearby beach had thousands of hedgehogs. They cut 6 steel rails from hedgehog obstacles, each rail 10 feet long, then cut those into 2-foot sections. The resulting prongs weren't elegant, rough-cut steel, slightly different lengths, welds that would horrify a peacetime inspector. But they were strong. Henderson, who'd worked in a Chicago steel mill, knew how to make welds that wouldn't break under stress. By 0400 hours on June 29, Culin's Sherman had 4 steel teeth jutting from its front like tusks. The crew called it Culin's plow. Other tankers gathering for morning maintenance looked at it and laughed. "What the hell is that supposed to do?" one sergeant asked. "Scratch the hedgerows to death?" Culin ignored them. At 0600, with Captain Depew watching skeptically, Culin drove his Sherman toward a hedgerow at the edge of the tank park. Not a combat situation, just a test against a typical bocage boundary. He accelerated to 15 miles per hour and hit the hedgerow straight on. The steel teeth punched into the earthen base. The Sherman's weight and momentum drove the prongs deeper. Instead of climbing up the hedgerow like every other attempted breach, the tank kept its nose down, kept pushing forward. Roots tore. Earth crumbled. The Sherman's engine roared. And then they were through. The tank emerged on the other side of the hedgerow, roots and dirt falling from the steel teeth, the crew staring in disbelief. They'd just driven through 800 years of fortification in 12 seconds. Captain Depew stood speechless for a moment, then started yelling for every officer in the battalion to come watch. By noon, they demonstrated Culin's device 6 more times, punching through hedgerows from different angles, different soil conditions, different root densities. It worked every time. General Bradley himself arrived on July 2 to observe a demonstration. Culin, terrified and standing at rigid attention, explained the concept while Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges, commander of 1st Army, watched his Sherman punch through 3 consecutive hedgerows without slowing down. Bradley turned to his staff. "How fast can we make these?" An ordnance officer did quick calculations. "Sir, if we mobilize every maintenance battalion and use beach obstacle steel, we could equip 500 tanks in 2 weeks. Maybe 2 weeks is too long. I want every tank in Normandy equipped in 5 days." "Sir, that's not 5 days," Bradley repeated. "This invasion was stalled because we couldn't get through hedgerows. Now we can. I want these teeth on every Sherman, every tank destroyer, every armored vehicle capable of mounting them. Use every welder we have. Work around the clock. This is priority 1. What followed was the most frantic manufacturing operation of the Normandy campaign. Maintenance battalions stripped every Czech hedgehog from Omaha, Utah, Gold Juno, and Sword Beaches. Welders worked 18-hour shifts. Combat engineers cut, measured, and delivered steel rails to tank parks across the beachhead. Tankers named the devices Rhino horns, after the tusks jutting from their hulls. Shermans equipped with the modification became Rhino tanks. By July 7, over 500 American tanks carried Culin's hedgerow cutters. The impact on combat effectiveness was immediate and dramatic. Suddenly, American armor could move through the bocage the way it was designed to move: fast, aggressive, maneuvering freely instead of crawling through predictable lanes. German defensive positions carefully sited to cover hedgerow gaps became irrelevant when American tanks simply drove through the hedgerows 50 yards away. The tactical implications extended far beyond mobility. Now, when American tankers encountered German armor in the bocage, they could maneuver. They could flank. They could use speed and numbers the way armor doctrine intended. The Tiger tank's superior gun and armor still mattered, but the terrain no longer trapped American Shermans into frontal slugging matches. On July 11, near St. Lo, a platoon of 4 Rhino Shermans from the 3rd Armored Division encountered a Tiger position to cover a crossroads. In the old bocage fighting, this would have been a massacre. The Tiger would have destroyed each Sherman as it approached down the lane. Instead, the American platoon leader used his radio. 2 Shermans engaged the Tiger frontally, not expecting to penetrate its armor but forcing the German crew to focus forward. The other 2 Shermans punched through hedgerows on either side, emerged in flanking positions, and hit the Tiger's thinner side armor from 150 yards. The Tiger brewed up in seconds. Similar engagements repeated across Normandy through July. Rhino tanks turned the bocage from a German fortress into a killing ground for trapped German armor. Panthers and Tigers, previously dominant, found themselves unable to protect their flanks because American tanks appeared from unexpected directions. The casualty statistics tell the story. In June, before Rhino tanks, American armored divisions in Normandy suffered an average tank loss rate of 24% per week. After Rhino implementation in July, that rate dropped to 9%. The reduction came almost entirely from decreased ambush and hedgerow climbing losses. American armor could finally fight the way it was meant to fight. The Falaise Gap operation in August demonstrated Culin's invention at operational scale. 2 entire armor divisions, equipped with Rhino tanks, maneuvered through the bocage to encircle retreating German forces. The mobility that had been impossible in June became routine in August. American tankers later credited the Rhino modification with transforming the Normandy stalemate into the breakout that liberated France. Curtis Culin received the Legion of Merit for his innovation. The citation praised his initiative and mechanical ingenuity, and noted that his invention materially contributed to the success of Allied operations. He accepted the medal quietly, uncomfortable with attention, more concerned about getting back to his crew. After the war, Culin returned to Tennessee. He worked as a welder, ran a small machine shop, raised a family. He rarely discussed his wartime innovation, and when veterans groups asked him to speak, he usually declined. In 1984, an Army historian tracked him down for an oral history interview. Culin, then 69 years old, was asked what made him think of using hedgehog steel for tank teeth. He shrugged. Seemed like the obvious solution once I saw all that steel sitting there. I'm surprised nobody thought of it sooner. The historian pressed, but you violated regulations by modifying your tank without authorization. Weren't you worried about consequences? Culin laughed. Son, watching my friends burn in stuck tanks worried me more than regulations. That practical mindset, that willingness to act rather than wait for permission, characterized the entire innovation. While Army engineers debated solutions and drew up specifications, a Tennessee farmer with a welding torch solved the problem in 24 hours using scrap metal from a beach. The legacy extends beyond Normandy. Modern combat engineering doctrine still teaches the principle. Sometimes field improvisation outperforms engineered solutions because the soldier facing the problem understands it better than distant planners. Curtis Culin died in 1993 at age 78. His obituary in the Knoxville News-Sentinel mentioned his military service in passing, noting he was a decorated World War II veteran. It didn't explain that his stupid wire trick, as skeptics initially called it, helped win the Battle of Normandy. Because the best innovations don't wait for approval from headquarters. They come from people who see a problem, grab a welding torch, and refuse to watch others die while waiting for engineers to finish their calculations.